Good afternoon and good evening to everyone on the call. I'm very much looking forward to the exciting event we have today in Connected Mobility and Data Marketplace. First of all, I'd like to do a quick introduction of the CBA. Before I start that, a little quick introduction of myself. I'm Kevin Lally, Vice President of the Board of Directors for the last 2 years in the CBA. And before that, I was the Executive Director of the CBA. The Crypto Valley Association predominantly focuses itself on the support and adoption of blockchain use cases throughout the country of Switzerland and builds bridges to international locations. For example, like MOBI that we have co-hosted the event today with. I also want to make a brief thank you to the Blockchain Center and University of Zurich and also Cardano that we co-host the event with here today. Thank you very much for your participation. I also wish to make a very brief thank you to the participants from the SBB, Swiss Federal Railway, Swiss Re themselves, MOBI of course, Bosch, and the Cardano Foundation, as well as the University of Southern California, as well as Cardossier. I will just cover briefly that the number of active working groups that we have in relation to where the focus working groups are in the CBA. We have an investor working group. We have the startup working group. We also have the regulatory working group that is focused on legal and interfacing with the Swiss financial regulator FINMA predominantly, as well as addressing the open progress around the Open VASP initiative, for instance, in the FATF. We also have a tax working group, and to cap it off, we have, of course, the enterprise blockchain and the cybersecurity working group. With that brief, I wish to again welcome everyone to the call, wish everyone an informative meeting, looking forward to it very much, and thank you again for joining on behalf of the board of the CBA. Have a very nice event. Back to you, Dennis.
Yes, thank you very much. It's now up to me to thank as well all the participants and especially as well our sponsors, the University of Zurich and the Cardano Foundation for making this event together with MOBI and the Crypto Valley Association possible. My name is Dennis Flass. I'm the chairperson of the Enterprise Working Group, co-chairing it together with Mauro, who will be our master of ceremony tonight and take us through the event. I'm then heading later on the panel with my good panelists. Yeah, the Enterprise Blockchain Working Group, what's our objective within the Crypto Valley Association? And yeah, I mean, I see that we have at the moment a little bit a big discussion about platform economy. That is the big buzzword out there, and I think it is a future business model where a lot of ecosystems are moving towards. But we have two worlds there. We have on one side the more centralized models that we know from large tech giants, especially as well from the Silicon Valley. Later, a little bit on that one. And on the other side, we have, of course, the decentralized networks building on decentralized cryptographic technology and blockchain technology. And our aim at the working group is, of course, to identify success factors that make decentralized networks more successful, because we strongly believe that this leads in the long run to more market efficient solutions. And when you saw lately the discussions about competition law threats from Google in the US Senate and Congress at the moment, or what the European Union is as well doing, I think there is a fair statement that we have to take care about market efficiencies in the future. And what we do is we do events like this. We as well work on white papers, which I'm very glad that we hopefully before Christmas can launch a quite large ones that we elaborated in the working group. And we support universities and students and enterprises to come together to do research on the topic of enterprise blockchain solutions. So that's what we do. And I'm very glad now to hand over to Mauro to introduce our first speakers.
Thank you, Dennis. Yes, we have the first speaker, which is Eva Oberholzer. She is a Chief Growth Officer at Cardano. Obviously, she's going to present us about how we can monetize data in the future. And I think you have a special focus on the Asia market. So, just for the information for everybody, we're going to have questions at the end after the three speakers. Eva, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're going to see some slides soon, right?
Yes, exactly. But they share?
Yes.
Do you see something?
We don't at this point. Maybe it takes a moment to kind of switch.
Okay.
I think you should have the right to do that.
Somehow, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
But it's not popping up. So maybe I'm not really good in multitasking.
Let me quickly check if anybody else has the slides. Does anybody?
I don't think so.
Eva, I will send you an email quickly and you can send it to me and I can put it on the screen. Mauro, maybe then we can have Tram or Evangelos go first.
Yes, please.
And then we can have Eva second.
Yes. Okay, good. Then yes, let's have the second speaker, Tram. You're the co-founder and CEO of MOBI, right? You have been in the space for quite a while. I think, what's interesting to us in this session, we're not just talking about financial industry this time. We're talking about different technologies coming together and monetizing that. So, Tram, the floor is yours. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. I think you should see my screen now, correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. So thank you, and it's been great organizing this event with the CVA, and thank you, Cardano, for sponsoring our event. For the next 10 to 15 minutes or so, I will talk about MOBI current technology and future technology initiatives that we are calling the MOBI technology stack. We started working on the ecosystem for what we call the minimum viable community in early 2015. And 3 years later, in May 2018, we launched with 35 founding members. And now we have 100 and growing. We are working with our standards, our members to create standards and digital ways to identify all things mobility, including transactions. And MOBI itself, is important to note that we are technology and ledger agnostic. Why are we creating standards? Well, before adoption of any revolutionary technology, industries need standards to give specs and to build the foundational infrastructure so that we can create products and services that can communicate and work together. Why is the MOBI community the right place to start and create these standards? Well, cumulatively, the community has upwards to 15% of global GDP. We have over 100 years of trusted partnerships with cities and government and consumers. And we have the ability to assign digital twins, the ability to install secure wallet at manufacturer, and the ability to build payment channels for the ecosystem. MOBI currently has 6 working groups. The first one had, of course, to be vehicle ID, and that one launched our first standard last year. The second vehicle ID working group just finished discussion this year, and now is drafting the second standard. So essentially the first vehicle ID standard was for the birth of the vehicle, and now VID2 is writing a standard on what happened to the vehicle from birth to grave. And the usage-based insurance has drafted a standard, and now it's being reviewed by the working group members. Electric vehicle grid integration, EVGI, we pushed out our standard last month, and now it's being reviewed by the community. Connected mobility data marketplace, we has concluded discussion, and now we're in the process of drafting the standard. And the two working groups that we launched this year, the first one was supply chain, is going through technical requirements definition, and the standard for that is from materials to parts and parts ID. And when we have that standard, it will be connected to our vehicle ID. And the last working group we launched so far is finance securitization and smart contract, and we are going through business requirement definition for that. Although we are a blockchain-based standard, producing blockchain-based standards for the ecosystem, we don't see ourselves as a blockchain organization. We see ourselves as a community project. Blockchain is not a standalone technology. The convergence of these technologies that you see on the screen here together with blockchain will give anything a secure identity, be intelligent, and securely interact and transact with each other. And these capabilities will define the future of mobility and how we consume mobility. We build an ecosystem for what we call the new economy of movement, which we believe to be a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity for connected mobility and infrastructure, exchanging data and payments seamlessly. No matter how good the standards are, at the end of the day, they are just pieces of paper with writing on them. They need to be adopted and implemented to create impactful outcomes for the ecosystem. And to do that, we have started two more initiatives. One is the Open Mobility Network, which is the OMN. And then the second one is Setopia Application Marketplace Platform. This is a very simple architecture overview for the MTS. So the MOBI standards, the OMN, and Setopia are the three distinct layers of the full stack for the MTS. And here is a more detailed architecture for the MTS. On the left is MOBI working groups working to create standards. And the standards themselves will determine what kind of data and core services are available to the OMN. So what the OMN is essentially is a protocol agnostic business-to-business network that enables all the stakeholders participating to share, exchange, and monetize mobility and transit data. And these shared core services that we come up with for the OMN will allow all the applications sitting on top of it to be able to communicate and talk to each other. So instead of getting apples and oranges, we'll get apples and apples. And the Setopia Marketplace platform built on the top of the OMN, which is on the right side of your screen here, is built on blockchain to enable a very important feature, which is data privacy. Existing marketplaces out there, as mentioned by Dennis, is built on current technology with very similar business models to scrape and monetize data from their users. And MOBI has over 100 members and counting, and most of our members are competitors. Therefore, we need to provide a platform, Setopia platform, so that all the members can come and do business and retain their business models and the customers, and not worried about being poached. And to bridge the members to our MOBI, to the mobility consumers, we want the consumers to have just one app instead of downloading 100 apps from 100 members in our ecosystem to do business with us. So Setopia gives the consumer what they want and expect based on research, which is a seamless experience on one platform. In the blue boxes at the bottom of the screen right now are the different use cases that are being explored by each of the working group. And these use cases will produce standards that determine what data and core services are available in the open mobility network. Here is a full stack example for usage-based insurance. The MOBI UBI standard covers the major insurance use cases. And then from the standard, trusted and permission data, for example, such as identity or driving history, is available to the OMN participants. And then insurance carriers participating in the OMN, for example, the ones listed here on the left side of the screen, can use the data and core services available to them to offer usage-based products to consumers like Uber drivers, car rentals, and so on, through their own dApps. The platform itself has a similar look and feel to other map-centric apps out there, and cities and government can use this also to encourage green mobility and green behavior. For example, during traffic congestion, cities can offer incentives for the drivers to take a different route or not get into the car at all. Recently, the city of Los Angeles issued a study where around 70% of people in the cars during rush hours are actually not going to and from work. So if they can give them incentives not to get in the car at all, that would be a great of the traffic congestion. And then the city can also give other incentives like walking to your favorite restaurant for dinner instead of driving. And the incentives given by the city can be traded in for other services that's offered by the city. Setopia is a tokenized ecosystem. So where mobility asset owners, the ones at the bottom of the hourglass here, can be connected to the consumers at the top of the hourglass through a single payment platform. And at a high level, there are three components to this ecosystem as well. And there is the marketplace, which offers data privacy. Therefore, competing mobility players can conjugate, and the user can come and consume mobility services without worrying about data being poached. And the second component is a utility stable token to facilitate transactions with low friction. And there is the community to create, adopt, and implement standards. We've been doing this for a while, and this year has been very encouraging to see governments around the world launching more and more blockchain and mobility initiatives. In the US, for the first time, the US Department of Transportation requested proposal for blockchain application in mobility. There were 122 proposals, and the award went to 4 universities with research labs. And all the light blue states that you see on the screen right now, those are part of a initiative called Road Usage Charge West, RUC West. And those states this summer received a first award by the US Department of Transportation to start doing experiment in blockchain application for road usage charge. And the EU Commission this summer asked MOBI, along with 2 other organizations, to present internally to them what do we all think the first use cases will be for what they call programmable money, machine-to-machine payments. And it was encouraging to see that the other 2 organizations, along with MOBI, all think that mobility will have the first use cases. And Eva will talk more about Asia, but Asia actually has a lot of initiatives coming up. For example, South Korea was the first country to announce that their highways will have blockchain power toll payments. And in May, South Korea also launched an initiative issuing blockchain driver license. And by August, 1 million of their citizens have opt-in for this driver license. And they are also working with Japan and New Zealand to pilot road usage charge. And Japan is looking into issuing digitized driver license. And it's also worth noting that in July, China issued a white paper, the government issued a white paper on smart city initiatives using blockchain. And one of the large components, of course, is mobility in smart city.
Tram, fantastic timing. Fantastic
Thank
timing.
you. Good. So if you want to learn more about MOBI, please go visit our website and follow us on social media.
Thank you, Tram. We got 2 questions that we're going to discuss later, but I'm going to post them to you so you can start thinking about it. They're very sophisticated, standard oriented. You get them on our chat. Now, as next, we will continue with Evangelos. He is the head of digital ecosystems at Swiss Re, thought leader and advisor in the insurance industry. So we're very interested to hear how you guys are making use of IoT, AI, and blockchain in your space.
Very good. So hopefully everything works perfectly. You can see my screen, let me know. And whether you can hear me as well.
We can, yes.
Oh, perfectly. Perfect. So I'm not going to talk too much about what we do, how we do it, rather than what really matters to consumers. So I won't talk too much about insurance. I will talk about from consumer side what will be important. So let's see about how we're going to change, or how the mobility might change in the future. And so if you think about how did you lately consume mobility and how you might consume mobility in the future, so there will be still some traffic, some public traffic, transportation, sorry, there will be still some shared mobility, there will be still everything else that is here already. So nothing new, but there will be some new mobility types or new mobility models or business models. And the interesting part of that will be to think about how does also micromobility change. For the time being, this is what we see in the streets, but you can imagine that new models are going to be introduced, something like this here from Toyota, or sorry, this one here will be from Toyota here. So this micromobility space will dramatically change, I would say, over time, because the need, the jobs to be done will not disappear. It's the other way around. People want to go as fast as possible from A to B. So we will see some new models. And the question is, finally, considering all the mobility needs, what will it be about? It will be about the mobility customer. And the question is on the mobility customer. So what's going to be so important from a customer point of view? So imagine that you have today's different apps you might be using, and some of them are really very cool to use. Some of them are really very, very hard to use. And we as an insurance industry, we are not very, very good at, let's say, the customer experience on the mobile phone so far. So in the very end, I would say it will be about a seamless customer experience. So the customer will really, really demand that. And this is what we just have discussed just in the previous presentation. But think about what is there in the market. So everybody's using Uber apps and everybody's using the Lyft app. Problem with that, there's almost no differentiation. And if you go to different markets, like in China, or you go to India, all of them have a very, very, very similar business model. And the question is, if new entrants are entering the markets, then you need to get started differentiating. And differentiating means you cannot do it the same way like everybody else. Otherwise, the price will just decrease dramatically. So the question is, how can you differentiate? And the question is also, if you need to differentiate on an interface, how can you do that? Just 2 examples. One is the Uber example, where you have different kinds of transport, and they started with urban air mobility on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you see the micro-mobility areas. And in the middle, this is what is known. If you go to other marketplaces like Southeast Asia, Then there's another competitor. So Grab just bought a couple of years ago Uber, and you see there are new types of mobility which could be interesting, like Grab Family here or Grab Pet. So you can ride your pet on the same thing. So there are much more kind of products being offered on that. And the question is, who will be able to fulfill actually many needs here? So Uber, as I showed before, investing in many other types of transport, and there are other players in the markets doing exactly the same thing, like Gotcha here in the US. Or now we have collaboration on the left-hand side from BMW and Mercedes, because part of the pie is about being in direct relationship with the customer. And exactly the same thing happens on the right-hand side, like Toyota's thinking about how do they need to develop the business model in order to stay relevant, in order to be in direct interaction with the customers. So we will see new players getting into the market and try to get as much as possible from actually for the customers in order to serve actually different services. This is a product-driven view, right? So we have different types of transport that are being offered, hopefully in a very seamlessly way. So if you consider my journey on a daily commute could look like that. So I will get my subscription service going to the next train station, get the train, perhaps then I need to share a bike, and then in the afternoon I might get a kind of Uber drive. In the evening when I go back home, I take another kind of e-scooter, go to the train station again, and then go back home again. So the question is, if I want to do that, how many apps do I need? And the obvious answer to that, I need a lot. So only to manage this kind of journey, I will need about 5 to 6 apps doing that simultaneously. And is this the customer-centered view? No, it's not. Of course, there are other solutions, and this is a question, how many apps do you want to have? We just heard it before, the single app that will kill actually all this, or that will offer actually all these solutions integrated. Let's see how this is going to work out. So think about if you go into the micromobility space where you have different participants already in the market, and the question is, do you want to download all the apps here? And of course, you don't want to do that. And there's already an app, transit app, doing exactly that, integrating different services into a single app. Does this exist here in Zurich? No, it doesn't, not yet. But you will start thinking, how can I integrate other types of transports? And of course, WIM, that is integrating a multimodal view. However, this is on a subscription basis, so it's not an on-demand thing. It's a kind of mixed thing. It goes to the right direction. That's exactly the way it should be. But think about further. So this again, Southeast Asia. This is the killer app from Southeast Asia called Grab. And you don't see only mobility services. So you see the car, bikes here, that's correct. But then you have hotels and videos and e-scooters and everything around that. And there's another competitor, actually not a mobility provider, it's another super killer app. So you have a super ecosystem competing another super ecosystem. So we're not going to talk here only about mobility, we're going to talk about consumer needs, where mobility is just one part of it. And only to show it, mobility is one of the killer features here, but also the other one, like the trip planner, like I showed you before. So the kind of customer interface will play a fundamental role. And this is why you might only need one app actually managing that one. But think further, what will happen, as an example, if Google or another player has so much trust to the customer that he knows where the consumer is going? Perhaps you might have access to the calendar, perhaps you might have access to other kind of insights, contextual insights. How come if a provider could actually contextualize your mobility journey and offer the products that are matching to your mobility needs immediately? So this means that your behavior is being tracked, but also in a prescriptive way in order the products being solved or offered, also the mobility products are being offered seamlessly. So you don't need to think about to get access to an app. This is going to be handled actually in the back end, on the background for you. So think about, you have a smart assistant that has access actually to your next best action, which is a meeting somewhere else, or in the evening, you might go back home, and they know exactly so they arrange actually the services for you where the contextual behavior insights are driving the marketplaces. So we turn the market around. This does not exist yet, I know, but it's just a matter of time until you get enough trust and you change the business model around that the consumer is actually not thinking about which is the best service, that the assistant is doing that for him in the background for him. And you don't need to care about any things in addition. This will create a kind of new competitive landscape. So the competitive landscape between openness, this is on the horizontal axis, and the personalization of products or on the journeys, this is on the vertical axis. And if I try to map here different players in the market, you will see on the bottom left, these are more the classical OEMs that of course want to go towards the top right, as I was showing before, or you go from this is the red bar on the right-hand side, right top, where you have the Google Assistant or the kind of behavior insights provider that can map you what is actually relevant for you, and they will do everything that on the back end. This does not exist yet, I know, but Grab is there, GoCheck is there, and other ecosystems, especially in Asia or in China, are existing already. So there will be a kind of new competition that we have not seen so far. And the integration of services will be the killer thing in the very end. So think about if everybody can now finally create mobility services. Think about if everybody can create banks. And think about if everybody can create, insurance products. What will happen then to the competition? If everything gets commoditized, you need to differentiate. And how are you going to differentiate? Again, how many apps do you want to have on your mobile phone that are start caring for you? And by caring, I mean they need to deliver a service like the augmented reality or the VR or augmented reality here, where you are on a micromobility trip and it tells you actually where the next station is or what you need to do next and so forth and so on. So you need to integrate a best customer experience in order to stay relevant. So the product side will not be really the differentiator. It will be the customer experience that makes the race. And the question is, how are you going to drive a relationship with the consumer in order to stay relevant? This is why the consumer interface will make the difference in the future. And this is my last chart. We all have started from a digital product, a digital service. This might go into a digital platform, like the Ubers, the Didis in this world, what we have seen so far, but this will not go, this is not going to be enough. We'll see digital ecosystems that have a holistic customer-driven view that are there and that are going to stay relevant because they want to deliver best-in-class customer experiences in order to fulfill their needs. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Evangelos. That was very interesting, and I think you've picked up a lot of things which are happening in Asia too, right? I think a couple of these providers are coming out of Asia, which kind of leads us to to Eva, which we had initially. I think Eva, you're now ready to share your slides. Thanks a lot, Evangelos. Yeah, we're going to take questions at the end. Eva, you there? Hello.
Yes.
Okay, great, good. So does it work with sharing now?
I hope so, and otherwise we have a backup. Let me try.
That's very good.
All right. Yep.
Something is happening. Good. Very good.
Is it?
Yes, fantastic. If you go full screen, then we can see it even better.
I am on full screen.
Okay, it still looks a little bit.
Wait a second. We should have tested that.
Yeah, no, not the full screen, more presentation mode. I think where do you need to go?
Yeah.
On my PowerPoint slide, I guess, right?
Yes, down on the right. Yes, that's perfect.
Do you see it now?
We see that you have pressed the button. We're just waiting for it to happen.
Okay.
Or do you have two screens, maybe?
Because I don't see the screen anymore, it's just my presentation. That's why you have to guide me through.
Yeah. So maybe we can only see the small thing. Maybe what they suggest that you just increase the size on the right, a little bit on the right where you are right now, on the bottom to higher percentage, and then I think we should be able to deal with it.
Oh.
Yes, that was a little bit too much.
Just where you see click add notes, can you pull that down all the way down? There's a bar above click add notes. You can move that to the bottom. And you can also close on the right side, that little X next to format background.
Yeah.
Where's that X?
On the right, yeah.
Oh, yes. Top right, where it says format background on the right side, you can kind of click that away. That gives you a little bit more space.
Is it working? No.
Yeah, almost. You just, yes.
It's weird that the presentation mode is not working.
Yeah. If you make it a tiny smaller, then I think we're good.
Like this?
A little bit more. Yeah, let's go with that. Let's go with that.
Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, so Eva, you're gonna give us more some insight how to monetize data.
Exactly. So that was actually the perfect introduction where we talked about digital ecosystem, and I probably go one step further and talk about digital and decentralized ecosystem. Since we at Cardano, we are a blockchain project, as you might know, and I'm very happy that Tram actually mentioned what's going on in Asia. I also won't focus too much on Asia because I think what is really valuable for you to know, or the valuable insights I can bring to you, is really from a tech perspective. And don't worry, I'm not a tech person or not a programmer, but I will just show you what the status there is and what are now the next steps we can do. Where do we stand and what are the next steps and the big things that are happening. And we already work with a lot of governments together to get actually their government and in the next step their city smarter. And I think that's probably the valuable insight I can give you. When we talk about data monetization, I think it's important that we first look at the entire ecosystem and what is needed. And therefore, I quickly want to give you a short introduction of what Cardano is. I want to bring a new standard into we want to challenge the old and active new age and come up with a sustainable and global distributed innovation across the world. So what does that mean? We are a third generation proof of stake blockchain network, which is now developed into a development, a decentralized app development platform with a multi-asset ledger and verifiable smart contracts. And I won't go into details, but this is for the techies that really want to understand where we now stand. What is important is that we aim to be leading in scalability, interoperability, and sustainability. And one important aspect is that we proof of stake. And this is also why we call ourselves a third generation blockchain, because before we had Bitcoin, we had Ethereum. They were both on proof of work with very cumbersome processes, and we actually moved to a new era. So what are the entities between Cardano? We have three main entities. One is the developer company, IOHK. Then we have the foundation, in which I work for. And then we have a Morgo who drives the commercial adoption, let's say. And one of the very important aspects of the protocol's design is that it's geared toward protecting privacy rights, and also taking into account the need of regulation, the needs or the requirements that regulators are now publishing, especially like the travel rule, etc., for those who are more in the blockchain sphere. So this gives me a bit the perfect introduction into the topic data monetization and the future, not only of mobility but of trusted ecosystems. Which actually lets me start, or before we talk about data monetization, I think it's important that people understand what it takes to get there. So what is needed to get to data monetization. So where are we at the moment? As a consumer, our digital interactions are owned and controlled by others. So today, if I'm a consumer, our data, for example, I sign up with Amazon or any kind of platform, I give them my personal information, which they store in their database, and in some cases, they even monetize on it. And this actually creates a honeypot for hackers, because they can hack only one platform and they basically get access to all of your information, but also the information of other people. So the major issues are the identity theft, data breaches, data harvesting, fragmentation, and the user experience is really bad. And I will come to that. From a business point of view, we can flip the model over and look at the business side. So businesses face significant risk, high costs to secure personal data. Because they need extensive and expensive resources to secure the private and personal data of all their clients. That means they have high compliance costs, the data security costs are immense, fraud costs, customer trust, and also they have to provide their customers with a good user experience, which is quite tough. And this is why we currently see a trend that enterprises and businesses are designing serverless application and go into cloud solutions. What does this mean in this entire evolution phase, in evolution space? As I mentioned, we have different phases that will bring us to data monetization. But before we get there, I think we saw now the ecosystem, how it is. We saw that phase one is actually marked by a decentralized, externally controlled identity, which means we have sort of a decentralized identity where your data is stored and on many different platforms. And the biggest challenge for yourself is actually the user experience. You have to maintain about 30 to 40 accounts. You showed the app before. So which app you choose, for every app, you have a different password. So that's really cumbersome and super complicated as a consumer. So what we saw, or what we see today, and I think those phases go a bit hand in hand, we see a phase two, which is actually a federated identity, an identity that or data that is gathered by Google and Facebook, and they actually solve the pain point so that you can log in almost everywhere with the same account, which is, from a user experience perspective, it delivers a better experience, but however, this comes with a cost of your privacy. And you actually share with them all your data, which basically means your life. They know where you walk, they know what you do, they have the full record of anything, which is from a client perspective, probably also not the thing you want. So, and what we currently see is that we are entering a decentralized self-sovereign identity environment. What does that mean? A decentralized identity, or an identity you can manage by yourself, that's a system, or let's say it's actually the next step, and this is where blockchain kicks in, which tries to keep the user experience exactly the same than in phase two with Google and Facebook. But what changes is that the data is stored, or your digital identity is stored decentralized. So it allows you to protect your data and privacy, owning and therefore controlling the amount of data you share, the duration, and in the future, even the price of your data, which brings us to then the fourth part of the data monetization. So what is the driver of this new paradigm? I mentioned blockchain. Why can we now leverage in such a technology such as blockchain? The traditional identity system of today, as mentioned, they are fragmented, they are insecure, and they are exclusive. You needed kind of a central entity which manages and secures your data. Blockchain now enables more secure management and storage of digital identities by providing a unified, interoperable, and tamper-proof infrastructure, which is a key benefit, not only to users, but also enterprises, and which boosts the entire IoT space, which we believe. So the main characteristics, I don't want to go into detail what blockchain can do or not, because I think we are quite an advanced, or we are quite advanced in knowing the advancement. But the most, I think, from a user point of view, I think it's censorship resistant. That is important to mention. Because blockchain infrastructure is run by everyone, and it's not run by a central party, and it's resistant to platforms. So if platforms get hacked or face sanctions from a government, your data is still safe. That brings us actually to the topic of the smart cities. What does it mean empowering a new economy of trust? When you talk about smart cities, there are different model, a few different ways to look at the definitions, but I think what we all agree on the notion of a city with autonomous and connected operations, which handles different aspects of your urban life, and also actually are driven by a widespread use of information and communications technology. This technology is essential. Or this will be essential to actually drive economic value and give access to, or give an entire new access network experience. But in order for that framework to develop, its participants have to work closely together, embracing the new information and communication technologies. In the case of a smart city, there are three main categories of participants in this new economy of trust. So on the one hand, we have the government. On the other hand, we have the citizen, which is at the same time the user. And the third parties are the businesses, the organizations, and the service provider, who actually can then also build on that ecosystem and provide further services and application, or even decentralized applications, if so on. And I think this, from a tech perspective, we are actually quite close to that development. And I can say that because we, by ourselves, we have actually our the one partner in our ecosystem, IOHK, who's actually building, who's building the entire technology around Cardano. They also have launched Atala Prism. Atala Prism is actually really a tool or a provider for digital identity. And how do I, or not even a digital identity, it's actually a decentralized identity. And therefore, the first thing that is now needed from a tech perspective in order to bring design, to launch this entire ecosystem, or to make your data monetizable, is a so-called decentralized identifier. So the simplest way to think of this decentralized identifier is it's a secure backup and restore. You have all your credentials that are issued and stored on your device and secured by biometrics. So you have a known device where your entire data is stored, and only you can access this with your with your biometrics, for example. At the same time, there is this so-called secured vault that holds the encrypted credential from your decentralized identifier. So that means all your data is encrypted and basically available, but only you can decide who can access it via your decentralized identifier. Otherwise, it's just pure key and signs that you cannot really decrypt the information. This encrypted data store can live within the cloud, or can be hosted on Amazon, or can be hosted on anything. That doesn't matter. So it's not even necessary that you have all your data at your device. It's actually really, it's on the blockchain, and it's divided amongst all the participants, or the one that are interested in using your data. They have to come to you, or they actually have to, you have to give them permission that they can access your profile and content you've created. For example, I don't know, you're a writer or you're a musician. You can then actually give rights out, or decide to whom you give your rights, with what price, and define what the terms are of your license, or for handling out this data. So this is actually the next step, and this is when then really the monetization of data kicks in. But this will take a while. I think what is important to see and to know is that we need this entire ecosystem. We need this entire network to be on the blockchain, or to use actually this digital identity. And we also work together. We have a pilot project, a pilot market we are now testing. It's the Georgian government, so it's Eurasia, but that's probably the strongest use case I have at the moment. So with the Georgian government, they actually intend to become totally paperless in various areas, especially in transport. And there we look actually at the moment to provide them a platform where they can build on their services, where actually you, as a citizen, you go to the government, you do exactly the same process as you know, you take a picture, they take your credentials, but then actually they put it on your personal identifier, and by proving it, and by having this proof on the blockchain, it's actually it's tamper proof. So nobody else, when you go and travel and use transportation, or if you have to share data, it's automatically, the counterparties don't even have to access your data. They automatically see, because the blockchain is tamper proof, that actually, yes, this is a citizen of, and this is, and they just get the validation without actually entering your data. And this is something now we're trying to build, and we now elaborating in terms of other business use cases. We have various areas, because I think it's if we solve that issue with the digital identity, I think there can be built many business models around that data model, and especially for enterprises, it will be very interesting, because most of the enterprises, and this is also a bit the trend that we see now, it's probably the moment more cloud-based, but a lot of the enterprises, they actually they don't even want to own your data. So they also happy if it's just if they can actually just access the data they need. You give the permission. You can even set the terms with smart contracts that's on a blockchain. Set the terms and say, like, okay, for this data, you actually have to, your telco, you have to store it for 2 years. For 2 years, and afterwards you won't be able to access the data anymore. They don't have to store it anyway, because it's within the network. And models like this are actually within any business any business models. In the government, as I mentioned, it's digital ID, we have civic records, we have licenses, we have certificates, we have awards. In travel, we mentioned there we are highly engaged now with car sharing memberships. Probably to what we heard before, the new model is, as I mentioned, is not only that you have different application or you combine these application. In that model, these applications are still owned by someone, by a company, by Uber, by whoever, by Lime, and so forth. In the future, when we talk about a decentralized autonomous organization, it's actually, you can even be part or member of this application and recreator if you're part of the blockchain. And this is also, once we reach the point of decentralization, I mean, that's Cardano will belong to everybody, and I think that's then we are entering really the new economy, yeah, probably certain questions we have today will be solved automatically. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Eva, for that introduction. I would suggest that we just start.
Was it from my side?
Works. I suggest we answer you. We check your questions first for Cardano, and then we take the ones from MOBI. So I think we had a kind of more a generic question, Eva, about Cardano, how that compares to first and second generation blockchains. I guess, so the question was about security. I assume that, how is Cardano doing versus Bitcoin? I don't know if you can kind of relate a bit on that question first.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, good. The first aspect which I mentioned before is like we are proof of stake. That means we actually have a different consensus algorithm. Proof of work, Bitcoin and Ethereum, they actually, if you know it a bit, you had to run through really heavily you needed computer power in order to come to consent to validate blocks. And our blocks are actually validated by a new consensus mechanism. And something that really distinguishes us from probably all the blockchains are that we are very much scientific driven. So we work with a lot of universities. We have this peer review, which which is very common in academia. So before we start programming, we actually first let it reviewed by academia and by experts, and then we start programming. So that's probably one aspect. Then the sustainability aspect. Also, we want to create an entire ecosystem, and this is also a part why we have this Atala Prism. We don't only think of the blockchain itself. We think of, okay, what is needed for such a new ecosystem to thrive, and the technology is not always in like the most important aspect. It's the use case actually, and we want to bring those use cases to life. We also have like projects in Africa. We have a project with the United Nations where we give out funds for actually good projects that are now possible. And from a technology point of view, we really try to come up with a tech stack that is also unique. Like what will come like within the next few months or even weeks is we have an own, let's say, programming language, Plutus, that's more for developer, that they can actually build on the Cardano blockchain. But then we also have Mauro, which is just a drag and drop tool for anybody, for any enterprise who doesn't really know how a smart contract works. And it's like creating your own website. It's like if you want to create your own blockchain project and based on a smart contract, you can do it by yourself. And so I think in summary, it's really that we look at the tech, we validate before we develop, and there we have very high ambition. probably another one is, yeah, we're very inclusive. This is also one of the, I think we have the biggest community, or one of the biggest communities in the blockchain field, which is really amazing. And they are proactively helping us to evolve the protocol. And yeah, and the other aspect is then more just in sustainability, that we really try to make a difference there too, and come up with much more efficiency, scalability, and like make this entire blockchain actually more scalable.
Yeah, could you elaborate a little bit on sustainability? You know, kind of, we had a question around that. What does that mean in your terms?
So one aspect of sustainability is really the new consensus algorithm that actually you don't use. We have kind of a consensus algorithm which is not based on computer power, and we have like very smart mechanisms how we can be as like, let's say, how we can have as much as transactions as possible to the least usage of energy, let's say, in a very, very broad summary. And the second aspect is more that we really work with institutions, as mentioned, with the United Nations, but also we have projects in Africa where we not only want to give access to, let's say, unbanked people to banks, because we believe it's not only banks that are necessary, but they need to have actually access to those solutions that are just normal for us, which they don't have. And we actually, with this blockchain, we try to, with our project, we try to give them the access to and certain utilities they don't have at the moment.
Very good. Thanks a lot, Eva. There's two more questions. One is, you know, you mentioned a couple of use cases for secure identities. A question was about how we would use that for patient dossier, how you would see that.
I mean, as long as it's encrypted, you can use it for anything, right? Because it's not, I mean, you own the data, and it's actually, it would be very positive, because before I worked at Cardano, I worked on a project for MS patients, and we were happy that we had access to a database with a lot of information about patients. We didn't care about who the patients are, but we got a lot of information. And thanks to that information, we were able to build actually an intelligent tool based on machine learning, which can really take on so many data from you and compare that and give you the best treatment. And that's just one use case. And if you go one step further in the terms of data monetization, what is also possible in the future is that you actually think of, you have a huge record of your medicine, your health data, actually. You can also sell that. That sounds now a bit weird, but actually if Roche or a bigger pharma company, they do research and developments, they need actually data from patients. And in order to do that, they can just reach out and say like, hey, we need actually someone who's female, who is between 20 and 30, who has this and this and this characteristics. Would you share the data with us? It's going to be on an anonymous basis, and we pay you for that. And since you have that all in your own digital vault or wallet, you can actually allow them access and get paid for it. That's like one of the cases, but there are like many similar ones. I think the first argument is really get better intelligence, and the second one is related to data monetization that you get. And for the companies, I think it's good. It's nice too. It's much easier to get to such data.
Thanks a lot, Eva. So we have a few questions. I would like to continue with Tram for you. We got a couple of questions around some standards, TOMP and others, which I think you know much better as we. So if you could maybe elaborate on these questions that we got from Vitos and Amir.
Yes. I don't think I need to read out a question, correct? People can read it. But regarding to standards, each working group, we have two co-chairs, and the co-chairs are made up of members from our community. And then the MOBI staff, we have a technical lead, we have a working group lead, and we have a fellow. And together, the 5 of them, even before launching the working group, do extensive research to see what standards out there, what publications have there been regarding the use cases that they're interested in. And then from there, they design the project and the use cases. So we don't have enough staff to reinvent the wheels. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, because at the end of that, we just have a garage full of wheels and no car to go anywhere with that. I hope that answered the first questions. And then the second question is about the VID standard. Yes, is similar to distributed identities. When we call it a vehicle ID, we are not just limiting it to the car. It's actually for all vehicles, including scooter, bicycle, motorbike, and Tram, and delivery trucks. We are about to launch a MOBI European chapter, which our technical lead that we just hired is based in Germany. And along with that, we are hoping next year to also launch a working group on GDPR and California privacy issues around IDs and what data should be available and not available. And then I think the third question here is about our platform, how scalable it is. Right now, the Zootopia platform, we have it in beta version. One is iOS and one is Android, and it's built on Hyperledger for right now. And we are wanting to also include other blockchain, other chains also. And from the testing that we've done so far, it's about 200 transactions per second. And I think it's enough for what we're trying to do for now. As the technology mature, it will become much faster. I think I answered all questions correct.
There's one magic question, which is scalability, right? Obviously, we're transacting today a lot on these blockchains now with IoT and other kind of like dimensions coming into this. I think the transaction volumes obviously could massively increase. And that's the question is, where do you see limitations there, right?
So I'm not a technologist. That's not going to be something that I can answer, but maybe the panel next, Bhaskar could answer that for me, if I can reserve that for the panel next.
Okay, good. Okay, very good. Do you see working in connection with? Okay, there's one more question about vehicle ID. Let me just read that through. I guess several groups are working on standardizing separately. Do you see how such ID system going to be? Several ID system would exist, or going to be only one standard rule established? So I guess he's saying if we're going to have that single magic ID.
I don't think so. I think there might be different type of IDs for different ecosystem. I think the key here is that there has to be a way to be able to communicate from one ecosystem to the next.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interoperability. So are we going to have the same, which Evangelos told us, that we're going to have an aggregated ID of all IDs
Again, I'm not a technologist, so maybe the next panel can answer that question.
Okay, very good. Okay, thanks a lot, Tram. So I would suggest we're kind of 1 minute ahead of schedule, which is great. So I will pass over to Dennis. He's going to introduce the panelists and also what we're going to talk about. Thank you, Dennis.
Yes, thank you very much, Mauro. Yeah, very good presentations so far, and now we come to a more interactive section with the panelists, and I'm very glad to welcome with me tonight or today on one side Bhaskar. I will not even try to it on your last name. But Bhaskar is professor for electronical and computer engineering at the University of Southern California is calling in from California today as well. Same as well is Chris Ballinger, the CEO of MOBI, as well from Los Angeles, joining us here. And then we have two Swiss representatives on one side, Vitus Ammann, who I know already from the old days from Monetas, who is now senior advisor for digital transformation at the Swiss Federal System, which is our main public transport provider in Switzerland. And then we have Stéphane Mignon, who's head of the Adnovum incubator. Adnovum is a leading software house in Switzerland, and he is as well board member of Car Dossier, which is one of these platforms for used cars that we have here. Very glad to have you all here. And as I said, the topic is data monetization for the new economies of movement or the new economies of mobility. First of all, and we had that already in the presentations a little bit, what are these new economies of movement? I think before we talk about more monetization of the data, we need to explore a little bit on that topic. So my first question, Vitus, goes to you. The SBB, the Swiss Federal Railway Systems, is a traditional player, an incumbent in that area. And just to get for all our international guests a little bit the relationship here. I mean, Switzerland and Japan are the biggest railway system users in the world by as well kilometers and distances that you travel within based on the population. And now, of course, the incumbent becomes a very important role because you are the public transport company here. And what is your vision on the new economies of movement?
Well, thank you for the flowers. We are probably in Switzerland a bigger player in public transport, but public transport only accounts for roughly 20% of total mobility. So we have to put that in perspective. And I would also like to start with putting the new economy into perspective, because we have already quite some threats and opportunities pointed to us in the current situation. Basically, mobility is an ever-growing customer need. Since mankind has started moving around, we keep enlarging our radius of movement, both for commuting as well as for leisure purposes. I assume that the current contraction due to the pandemic will only have a temporary effect, because it's a mega trend which we see since centuries, basically. Having said that, it poses also the biggest threat to how are we going to move around all these masses of people, especially if all of them want to travel at the same time. Just imagine, looking at the picture Evangelos showed at the beginning, how many scooters, bikes, or micro shuttles you need to replace only one underground carriage, and add those to the already cramped streets we see nowadays. Therefore, the new economy needs to be much more a clever economy. At SBB, we strongly believe that we need to combine all kinds of mobility services into this sort of clever web of mobility services. If I look at the narrow space of public transport, which you mentioned is quite advanced in Switzerland, we have by and large achieved it. If a customer wants to travel from one public transport station to another, anywhere in Switzerland, she can do this with one single ticket, independently of how many of the 250 transport companies in Switzerland are involved in this journey. The biggest disruption we see for the new economy is obviously the advent of autonomous cars. We do not know when they come, how they come, but we are absolutely sure that they will disrupt our way of moving around and much more, also the way where we live, how we live, probably in a way as did the cars when they replaced the horse carriages. Many experts foresee a huge increase, actually, in traffic volumes. So our infrastructure might barely swallow that increase of traffic. Therefore, again, clever management and capacity utilization will be key. you will not be able to afford autonomous cars driving around with just one passenger, as cars do nowadays. So mixing and matching millions of customers with tens of thousands of autonomous shuttles and cars and whatever there will be quite a challenging task. As SBB is today the backbone of the public transport, the opportunity we see will be to become it in the future new mobility as well. The threat actually is just to miss out this opportunity and leave it to one of the global tech giants, as Evangelos mentioned it in his speech. Therefore, working hard on best customer experience is the key challenge for us nowadays.
Okay. Well, Chris, you as CEO from the Mobility Open Blockchain Initiative, MOBI, what is your vision on these, or what's your understanding of the key challenges and opportunities of the future ecosystems of movement?
So let me maybe say two things about the ecosystems. One is the ecosystems that we're talking about are a convergence of existing ecosystems of legacy players in different industries coming together and mixing and matching in entirely new ways. And one example is this new mobility is a mix of the communications, of data, of traditional mobility players, and even of infrastructure operators, right, coming together in this ecosystem to make better use of the assets that are there and their various strengths. The second thing about the ecosystems is it's a monetization ecosystem. It's a transaction ecosystem. This notion that blockchain allows you to have secure identities, DIDs, and combine that with AI and IoT, and suddenly you have things, and mobile things in the case of vehicles, that have the ability to communicate with, and more importantly, to transact with other things, other vehicles, infrastructure, in ways that are wholly new and open up an enormous amount of value, because it can monetize things which are today not monetizable. Data being the one that we're talking about most today, but also infrastructure itself. The vast majority of the world's road infrastructure is unmonetizable. With the minor exception of freeway tolling, most city infrastructure, road infrastructure, cannot be monetized because it's more expensive to charge for it, or just technically impossible to charge for it with existing technology. And this notion of connected vehicles with digital IDs, enhanced GPS, the ability to have two-way communications in and out of the cars, will open that up for marginal cost pricing, for congestion pricing, for urban tolling, for enforcing green zones, for carbon emissions pricing, pollution pricing, and drone airspace pricing, on and on and on and on. And so it's tens of trillions of dollars of new opportunity.
Yeah. Well, Bhaskar, you're from the academic view on it. I mean, what are the kind of, I mean, you probably look even a step further as the near future. I mean, what are the things that you see on the long run?
So I think if you look at vehicles in particular, they've really transformed from being primarily mechanical platforms to computational platforms. They're data-driven. They have hundreds of microcomputers on board and powerful computers to process the data for autonomy. They are networked increasingly with more capable V2V communications, as well as 5G. And so as you're seeing the shift in what a vehicle itself is, these vehicles are themselves becoming more capable of offering digital goods and services and consuming these digital goods and services. This is sensor data, software to process that data. It is computation ability, it's storage. And the other thing that's happening, I think, at the same time is vehicles are going to become much more flexible in their use. Certainly they will carry passengers, but also become increasingly delivery vehicles, both themselves, but maybe as launching boards for, or launching pads for UAVs. They become portions of the supply chain in a very flexible manner. They could be used in an on-demand basis. They can become entertainment platforms as well. And so as you look at all of these, sort of the convergence of the digital technologies with the vehicular domain, I think there's all kinds of new interactions between vehicles and infrastructure that's going to drive some of these questions of data monetization. It's what people are also, in terms of autonomous driving right now, there's a lot of focus on the single vehicle, but there's a shift towards thinking about collaborative autonomy. What does it mean to kind of interact with the other vehicles on the road and with the infrastructure? And I think the other trend is the, or perhaps the opportunity there is for cities to really work with mobility providers, with vehicle manufacturers to think through the implications of this new economy in terms of sustainability, the environment, traffic, but also helping to grow the local economy and the businesses, which are also becoming digital and data driven. And so how does sort of the mobile infrastructure play a role in that? I think all of these are trends and opportunities.
I think a very good point that you say there, and especially that vehicles, because they're moving around, are as well data producers. And I mean, probably not in sunny California you experienced that, but here I think we had during the pandemic a little bit of problem with the weather forecast, because we just didn't have the data from all these airplanes over the Atlantic that were telling us if a storm is coming or not. Now, an existing platform which just recently launched in this ecosystem, and it's probably less about mobility services at the moment, but it has the possibility of future, but it is a platform that is connecting the data around mobility and around used cars, is the Car Dossier initiative, isn't it, Stefan? So it's an ecosystem. I think 22 members are now participating from various disciplines. A lot of incubators, but as well new players, startups that are coming together under that dossier. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about that existing or that ecosystem that you just launched.
Yes, thank you, Dennis. Yes, Car Dossier is a distributed blockchain-based platform supporting a complete business ecosystem around cars. And the heart of the platform is the dossier of the car, which is containing all the relevant record of a car during the whole life cycle, like import, like registration, services, change of ownership, accident, and so on. And part of the ecosystem are importers, insurances, garages, mobility providers, road authorities, and road federal office, which contribute to the dossier and are using it. So it's not only startup, but it's really established enterprise and player in Switzerland. And the question, why blockchain? Actually, if you analyze a business ecosystem, you are always faced with the following three challenges. The first one is a lack of trust between the participants. Second is a bad quality of data. And the third is the frictions during cross-company processes. And this is exactly the added value that blockchain brings. And this is a single point of truth. This is a data hub role. And this is a catalyst for automation of cross-company business. And we use exactly those blockchain features to build a Car Dossier as a digitization platform for the complete car industry in Switzerland. And not only for the second-hand market, but really for any kind of transaction within this ecosystem.
Thank you very much. Vitus, in Switzerland, we have another ecosystem on mobility, which is called the Swiss Pass. The key to mobility and leisure is what it's called. Basically, I think it is a card or an account, a wallet, you name it, that you have that gives you access to the 250 different public transport companies that we have. but the interesting thing is, and the Federal Railway Assistance is a major participant in there and sponsor from that, of course. But you have exactly decided against blockchain technology when you launched that ecosystem. Can you tell us a little bit why and what's the reason behind it? Are you muted?
Thank you. Actually, we have not decided against the blockchain because the system was already there. Funny enough, the first Generalabonnement, as we call a kind of a travel card with a yearly flat fee, was launched in Switzerland in 1898, so more than 120 years ago. That was already valid for 15 different railway companies at the time. Then in the wake of the green movement in the 80s, the legal requirements were established to enable that principle of the one fare, one ticket, which I explained in my answering the last question. Now, the governance of this system, of the Swisspass, and its management evolved obviously with the technology over the time. So having exchanged paper copies and then telex and then faxes and whatsoever, it evolved in a sort of a consortium. So as it would be named in the DLT speak. It is actually a cooperative of those mentioned 250 public transport companies who run this system. The cooperative, is it called now the Swisspass Alliance, it has charged SBB to develop and run the platform on behalf of all the members. I guess around the time when Satoshi Nakamoto wrote his famous white paper, the Alliance drafted the principles for the Swisspass. Today, more than 4.5 million, or more than half of all people living in Switzerland, are subscribed to this card, as you mentioned, as well as the digital identity which goes with it, which is a very centralized identity, I have to say, at this point. So instead of rebuilding the existing platform, which serves already 100% of the public transport, we now focus on adding other mobility services to the platform, such as car sharing, bike and scooter sharing, and parking, in order to provide our customers with a mobility experience as seamless as possible and to be prepared for the event of autonomous vehicles. And being organized in the form of cooperative, we have a kind of decentralized system, at least when it comes to governance, already in place.
Very good, thank you. I think that gives a good view, and especially as well with the presentation paired with Evangelos, what these future ecosystems or what the existing ones look like. And it is all about interoperability. It is all about identity as well, and it is about offering goods and service, and at a later stage. But at the moment, I think it's really about just plugging existing systems together and exchanging the data between each other. And I think, Mauro, we have a question that goes into that direction.
Yeah, exactly. Quite interesting here is, I think somebody's asking that obviously we're going to share a lot of data, and obviously there's some competition between different brands, which obviously don't want to share the data they capture with each other. And I think the question was, should we have digital identity for a service, right? Or should we kind of like, how do we secure that allowing to kind of capture the data, distribute the data, but keep it in the borders of competition? I don't know who's best to answer that.
Stefan, I think.
Yeah, so I can just give an answer regarding regarding this use case, so the business ecosystem. So the topics of identity is coming always really on the top of the priority and one of the main challenge to solve. And Eva spoke about self-sovereign identity, and this is exactly what we are doing now, implementing in Cardossier. And we use self-sovereign identity, whose goal is to give back to users the control of their data and identity. And so the data owners get full control over the data, and the data, the identity, so the person or an organization that own the data rights is in control of who, when, and why someone may access it. And this means that this is exactly important in such an ecosystem to give this, to implement this kind of instrument to be able to define exactly who is who may have access to that kind of data.
But just quick question maybe on that one. Clearly it could happen that nobody wants to share it, right? And they're going to start, preventing others to see. How would you kind of come across that problem? Do you somewhat anonymize the data, or how can it be shared rather than commonly?
I think that the owner of the data is allowed to say he doesn't want to share it. And this is a fundamental right. And I think this is exactly what we want to provide, in contrary to global provider like Facebook or Google, or where you don't exactly know how your data have been used. And the idea of Cardossier is exactly to have such a granularity of the data that you can say what kind, from a record of a car, what kind of data you want to share and which not.
Okay.
So you would say there is as well a right for anonymous travel, huh?
I think yes.
Yeah.
I think Vitus, that is as well a problem that we have with the public transport as well from time, that people just don't want to tell everybody where they were going,
It is indeed. And that is also one of the reasons why we see the digital identity as one of the key cornerstones of blockchain technology, or where blockchain technology or DLT applications can help most. It's also when we at the SBB looked at blockchains, we developed with all the divisions about 30 to 40 different potential use cases. We did 5 to 10 proof of concept or pilots, but in the end, it boiled down to two main factors which are missing in the ecosystem. First is the identity, and secondly is a trustworthy digital money or digital currency. So
we have all of that.
Digital francs. Well, it is coming, but you have no reach. So that's a problem. You have all those different ecosystems, like the mobility ecosystem, and I personally do not believe that there will be an identity for a specific ecosystem. There will be an identity for things and persons. Which will be used in all kind of ecosystems. There will be money, and it needs to be a trusted money, so the people know, be it the Swiss franc, be it the dollar, be it euro, and no fancy other stuff, which will be needed on a digital platform in order that people will engage with it. I see that there is a lot of movement going on in the terms of currency, be that run by or led by Facebook or by some central banks. That will definitely help. But we at SB also decided that the identity part will be something we want to engage ourselves. And we are very much following those developments of the SSI standards run by W3C, where we see a great potential in future.
Vitus, one question came up, Swiss ID, do you think that there's potential to move that into a more blockchain-based form?
The current system, which is developed and where the law has been drafted, is rather building on federated IDs. So at the time when the legal framework was built or was under construction, that was kind of the most advanced proven technology which is there. So as we can see, the blockchain-based identity systems, which you also have seen from Eva, they are still under development. Those W3C standards, which I mentioned, they are basically all for reference, for comments. So it might take another 3 or 4 years until we really can see that blockchain-based DIDs will be solidified enough or proven enough that can form the basis of those identities, I guess.
Maybe I can just add something about this. I think regarding Swiss ID is the question, the fundamental question is not about the technology behind. So if it's based on blockchain or not, the question is that, do we want to use a distributed system like self-sovereign identity who make us to make the issuer not centralized like Swiss ID is defined now, but to have then another way to create the identity and to prove them. And for that, it's more about the questions: what is a business model from such Swiss ID than really what is the technology behind, in my opinion.
We talked already a lot about the opposite side from now, these decentralized systems that we were talking about, and the beauty of, I mean, having a providers for identity, having providers for the cash flow, having providers for the transportation, and then all melting them together in kind of ecosystems and make them interoperable. Of course, then you have the other sides, which Evangelos showed us as well. And probably you, Bhaskar and Chris, you're just the closest to Silicon Valley. And of course, it would be interesting to understand how you see, what kind of strategies you see from those players, and how will there be opportunities, and will there be threats, and what do we need to watch out for?
I mean, I would say that a lot of the response to blockchain technology is both reactive and cautious. For many companies, decentralization is a threat in some ways to the way they traditionally essentially own a lot of data and are able to exercise that and monetize it. But also, it's confusing actually to go to a decentralized world, right? How would you monetize a decentralized system? Who's going to pay for the components of it? Now, there are exceptions. IBM, of course, has invested a lot in enterprise blockchain as an example. Facebook has its own plans with respect to blockchain. There are various cloud platforms looking at blockchain as a service offerings. But I think, it's still kind of, there's a level of skepticism and perception that this is both confusing and perhaps a threat. But I think something that is happening is there is a shift, a very perceptible shift in a focus on privacy of data. You look at Apple in particular making a lot of moves towards positioning itself as really emphasizing the privacy of data. And at the same time, new technologies like federated learning, which allow you to train neural networks on individual data without actually directly moving that data to a cloud point. And so there's other ways in which I think decentralization and data monetization might happen in ways that are privacy preserving, not necessarily using blockchain technology. But I think these are some of the trends that I see.
Mm-hmm. Chris, I think you're in mute. Cannot hear you. No, I think your mic disappeared. No, at least I can't not hear you. I don't know about the others. Yeah, okay. So pity, we will try. But I think, yeah, as he said, I mean, at the end, it becomes a little bit, from my perspective, it becomes a little bit into a battle. I mean, I think we will still see a battle of ecosystems. Huh? So on one side, it will be these centralized solutions that will make it very easy from a customer experience and from an usability, etc. That becomes quite interesting. I mean, we when we look at Asia, we see all these super apps, as they call them now, that are pure marketplaces, and everything is put together from finance, from public transport, from payment solutions, from insurance solutions. Everything is in one platform and provided like on a nice table to the consumers. Yeah, that is quite it. On the other side, of course, we have all these traditional providers, which, as you say, have their current business models. And they are, of course, at threat in losing the connection to the customer or have a new intermediary in between. And I think that is where the distributed technology, maybe blockchain, maybe distributed ledger technology, may it be decentralized databases connected by APIs together, that could be a good answer to these centralized solutions. And I think the MOBI platform or the MOBI initiative goes exactly into that direction, Chris. Is it? Can you hear us? Seems not to be hearing us as well. So it seems that we have totally.
Can we ping him on WhatsApp maybe?
Yeah, let's try that. Okay, but at the end, I think it still needs some kind of centralized aspects, even though you have decentralized solutions, and the governance behind such networks is a key thing. And I think in Cardossier and in the SBB, and perhaps you, Bhaskar, know as well certain models, how could such an governance of decentralized systems, decentralized platforms that enable data monetization of mobility, how could that look like? What kind of examples have you observed on the market?
I can speak to some work we've done at USC. We have been looking at community marketplaces for IoT data and working with the City of Los Angeles and other local government as well as industry partners to explore this question. And one way governance could work, depending on what the platform and the applications are, is to somehow connect it to the existing governance systems that we have for our cities, our counties, and perhaps in places like County of Los Angeles is 88 different cities, so there's already a pretty robust decentralized governance in some sense. And so I think one possibility is to connect these types of data marketplaces, particularly to the extent that the applications are intended to benefit the community, to our existing kind of political governance mechanisms to some extent. And I think there's some possibilities there to be explored.
Okay.
Well, I think interesting enough, we see two developments at the same time. Because if we look at the economy as it is today, especially in mobility, we do live in a very decentralized economy. I mean, we have the cars on its own, we have the garages, we have the car drivers, we have the public transport providers, we have the micromobility providers. I cannot imagine a more decentralized way of working together.
And that's only the horizontal view. You have verticals that goes for insurances and everything down this path.
Even more so. And then we have this movement of centralization on platforms, which some markets like information or news or so have already progressed quite a lot, or via social media. And we see the movement again into decentralization based on digital platforms. So I think we are currently in a very volatile situation, and I would not dare to make any prediction where the markets are going to. However, what we see is that what we've learned in the traditional decentralized world, that you need to find a consortium, that you need to find a governance, be that in a kind of a cooperative way, be that with lead companies or whatsoever. I assume that those models will also re-emerge in those digital decentralized platforms. And you need to kind of share the cost of developing those platforms as well as the benefits of it. So if I look at the Swiss bus example, which we have seen, the principle is that all the tickets which affect more than one transport company are basically sold by this cooperative and then distributed according the measured ways which people did with these tickets. It is a complex system. It will not be much easier when we have it all digitalized, because we just need all the information in comparable formats, which is quite a challenge. And that's also the question which we were discussing when it comes to the MOBI initiative. What kind of standards will there be? Will there be global standards? Will there be national standards or continental standards, whatever there is, to manage that complexity.
So Chris, yes, standards. I think that's another key thing. So governance is one thing, consortium, important, that everybody should participate on the platform, should be a part of this consortium and bring in their aspects to make sure they're not cannibalizing themselves in their core businesses. But at the end, it's as well, the consortium, there needs as well be a governance on standards. And I think that's exactly what the initiative is about, isn't it?
It's partly about standards, but it's partly about building the platforms and the rest of the plumbing so the standards can be used in a business ecosystem, a shared environment for sharing data, for sharing services. And I want to link this to the previous question about Silicon Valley, because I think it's a really important distinction. I think Silicon Valley's competitive advantage for the last 20 years has been scraping data off of other apps and putting it in proprietary data silos. I think this technology erodes that competitive advantage. And it also is something that I think the rest of the world is in some sense maybe better positioned than Silicon Valley to do, because Silicon Valley isn't particularly good at cooperation or co-opetition. So I think the kind of environments that we're talking about today, the kind of environments that MOBI is trying to create with its ecosystem, with its standards, with the open mobility network, is really the kind of environment that undermines the Silicon Valley model, enables a different business model that's more inclusive, particularly for other types of organizations in other parts of the world. But it requires plumbing first, which is where this standard and community building it comes in and why it's so important.
Yeah, perfect. Stefan, your experience as being such a consortium across different parties, what is the things you would say, hey guys, if you want to build these kind of new ecosystems for mobility of movement that are decentralized, involve different competitive and not only competitive players, but as well players that build together and joint value chain. I mean, we saw Evangelos' example of you pick a train, you go to a car, you have a bike and so on. I mean, these are vertical collaborations, these are vertical value chains. But being a consortium, what would be the kind of recommendations you give to us? Watch out when you want to build a network.
Yeah, I think the governance part is really important, and is something we had focused from the beginning beside the technology part. And just having the question, what is the legal form of such a consortium is the first question. For example, we have created an association, and so that all the members are equal on it and have a right to this. And this is important to define what are the design principles and to build your governance on it. And this kind of equality is really important. And in the case of Cardos here, we have built this association. The association is in charge for building, financing the core platform, and this is a collaboration. And on top of this platform, the members can build their own business model, and this is as a competition, and we can really live with that, a really good competition, because there is some big players we have two major insurances who are competing on the market, but they are part of Cardos here because they are seen they have a common interest to build this common data and the common layer to make this typical cross-company business ecosystems processes. And I think it's important to have the transparency and to be able after to really make the difference, what is the core, what is specific. And we also have so cross-company processes we are going to build. So we are working now on the whole immatriculation process of a car. So from buying a car, sending to get from the insurance certificate from the insurance, and how to get the vehicle registration card from the road authority, and to get after the role your registration card of your vehicle. And this kind of for this kind of process, it's important to have a clear definition what's belong to the core processes and what belong after to the different members.
Excellent. So thank you very much, Chris, as co-organizer of that of this event here. What's your conclusion on tonight?
I think what's wonderful about these types of events, where so many different parties from different backgrounds, different parts of the world, different industries come together, is it really highlights this notion of convergence. And so maybe that's the theme for the takeaway. It's convergence on so many levels, starting with the technology. The combination of DLT and AI and IoT, and to a lesser extent, perhaps edge computing and 5G and some others. Leading to vehicles and things generally having intelligence and being able to participate increasingly autonomous in this economic system, being able to transact with each other in ways that open up many new business models and open up, release things that can't be monetized today and open them up to monetization. Number two, geographies, this convergence of really, efforts that are going on around the world. Our membership in MOBI is truly global. We're roughly evenly split, and on the call today, it's Europe, Americas, Asia, all contributing to this. Cyber and physical, the convergence of physical and cyber things. The physical things are quickly becoming commodities. Car companies are now data companies, right? Tesla is a data company, is the most valuable manufacturer in the world. DIDs are the key to bringing the digital economics to the physical world. You might say that IoT turns products into services, but DIDs turn centralized monopoly services into efficient decentralized services. At least that's the hope. And maybe finally, industries, this convergence of transportation, energy, communications, together, this new economy of movement is upwards of 20% of global GDP. So it's just an enormous revolution and massive opportunity. Tens of trillions of dollars, tens of trillions of euros in new business opportunity to monetize this data and to unlock the stranded capital that exists today. Very exciting.
I personally think it's like exciting times that we're facing and that will come to us, especially now that we really go into these benefits as well from decentralized systems. And I'm a strong believer in market efficiencies, that decentralized systems come over centralized systems, although the centralized systems definitely have a key advantage in getting scale. And that will be one of the biggest challenges that we have. I mean, we probably then invest too much time in governance and making it happy for everybody. And believe me, we as here in Switzerland with our people democracy, we know exactly it always takes longer than it is, and sometimes you're just losing track in getting at the end of real results. And I just hope we are here in sometimes faster now in really delivering proper end-to-end solutions. But it will be exciting because we are now just shaping a new way of the economy for the future, and I think it will be quite interesting to see what it is. I would like to thank everybody for participating today. Eva, Evangelos, Tram for the presentations to give us the insights. I think the presentations will be as well later on available, at least on the CVA website. again, please, advertising, become member of the CVA. They're quite interesting events that you see. Not only these public ones, there are as well events for members that we're doing, at least as well from the Enterprise Blockchain Working Group. I would like to thank my panelists, Vitus, Bhaskar, and Chris. Thanks to California as well to participate in this early morning session, and for Stefan and Kevin as well for the evening sessions here. And of course, special thanks to Mauro, my co-chair in this working group. Exciting times, isn't it? And again, for hosting it and following the questions. And yeah, so thanks for everybody. Have a great evening, and talk to you soon at one of our next events. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.